class, and welcome to another week of Principles of Management. I'm really excited to talk to you about our topic for this week, which is leadership. In fact, we're actually going to talk about it this week and next week, followed by motivation, which are some of my very favorite topics. You can tell, or you will tell, my passion for leadership theory and talking about leadership, because to me it's really really important, and it lies at the heart of an effectively ran organization. You have to have good leaders in order for organizations to be successful. And so there are so many different leadership styles and traits and theories, and I just get so fascinated by it, and it's one of my favorite topics to explore. And so this week, you will learn what leadership is, when leaders are effective versus ineffective, what makes a leader effective. We will talk about the differences between management and leadership, or managers and leaders for that matter. We're also going to talk about traits that show the strongest relationship to leadership and the behaviors that leaders engage in. And the limitations of trait and behavioral models. We're going to talk about contingency models to leadership, understanding effective leadership and management in those organizations, and then we're going to explore transformational and charismatic leadership and all of those things this week. And so, really, really, again, happy to be talking to you about leadership and going over leadership theory with you. So, let's start out by discussing what leadership is and why it's important to management. So, if you contrast, and you may not know who these people are, but the leadership styles of Pat McGovern, who is the founder and chair of International Data Group, which is a technology publishing and research firm that owns magazines such as CIO and PC World and Computer World, for those of you who are tech gurus. These are magazines that you'll probably read. But if you compare the style of Pat McGovern with that of Tom Siebel, who is just the CEO of software company Siebel Systems, I don't know if you guys have heard of that either, but if you compare the two, McGovern treats each employee to lunch at the Ritz-Carlton on his or her 10th anniversary with that company, with the International Data Group, to emphasize how important each employee is to the success of that company. He personally thanks almost every person in every business unit once a year, which is amazing, which takes about a month of his time to do. In addition to appreciating and caring about his employees, McGovern also shows that he believes in them by decentralizing decision making, so that people have the autonomy to make their own decisions about how to best accomplish organizational goals. We spoke about that when we talked about decision making for managers. So Tom Siebel, on the other hand, in contrast, is known as a disciplined and dispassionate manager who remains somewhat aloof from his employees and likes to maintain strict control over every aspect of the business. He enforces a dress code, he sets tough goals and standards, and holds people strictly accountable. One thing that he said before, one of his quotes, is, "We go to work to realize our professional ambitions, not to have a good time." That's what he says. So both Siebel and McGovern have been successful leaders, although their styles are very, very different. And so you may say, well, man, uh, how is the other one successful? And we're going to talk about that. They're just different styles, but they've both been very, very effective leaders and of their organizations, and their organizations have realized success as a result of their leadership. So leadership is defined as the ability to influence people toward attaining company goals or attaining goals, period. Influence means that the relationship among people is not passive. And influence is designed to really achieve some end or goal. Leadership is also reciprocal, occurring among people, and it is dynamic and involves the use of power really to get things done. Um, so by process, a person exerts influence over other people and inspires and motivates and directs their activities to help with these goals. And that person who can do such a thing is called a leader. When leaders are effective, the influence they exert over others really helps a group to achieve its performance goals. When leaders are ineffective, their influence does not really contribute to and often really detracts from goal attainment. So, effective leadership increases an organization's ability to meet all contemporary challenges, including the need to obtain a competitive advantage, the need to really foster ethical behavior, and the need to manage a diverse workforce fairly and equitably. So, there are different personal leadership styles, and we're going to talk about the differences between managers and leaders also. Um, so, a manager's personal leadership style is the specific way in which he or she chooses to influence other people, right? So, that's their style. It shapes how really that manager approaches the planning and the organizing and the controlling aspects of management. Remember, we keep hearing these words: planning, organizing, controlling, um, which are the functions of management. So managers at all levels and in all kinds of organizations really have their own personal leadership styles that determine how they lead employees and how they perform other management tasks. So, although leading is one of the four principal tasks of managing, there's a distinction that's often made between managers and leaders because they are different. So, when this distinction is made, managers are thought of as those organizational members who establish and implement procedures and processes to ensure functioning. We talk about that a lot, right? The managers are accountable for goal accomplishment. They are task focused. Management's all about completing the task. Leaders, on the other hand, they look to the future. They chart the course for the organization and attract, retain, motivate, and inspire and develop relationships with employees really based on trust and mutual respect. All right, so um, management and leadership are both really important to organizations, but effective managers must also be leaders because of distinctive qualities associated with each that really provide different strengths for the organization. So they're both important. It's really good for, again, managers to try to be leaders, right? Or to be effective leaders. Although we've discussed in class, they're not, always, doesn't always work out that way. But management and leadership reflect two different sets of qualities and skills that frequently overlap with a single individual. And what that means is a person may have more of one set of qualities than the other. Ideally, a manager develops a balance of both manager and leader qualities. Management is known for promoting stability, order, and problem solving within the existing organizational structures and systems. Leadership, on the other hand, promotes vision, creativity, and change, questioning the status quo to replace outdated norms, and also helps the organization um, move toward the organization's future, while good management helps the organization to meet commitments. So, leadership cannot replace management. It should be an addition to management. Good management is really needed to help the organization meet commitments. Leadership is needed again for to help with the future. So leadership's power comes from being built on the foundation of a well managed organization. And so I know this could be a little confusing at times. We in class will I usually play a little game where we go over identifying the traits of a manager versus a leader, and it makes more sense than at that point, but it can be confusing sometimes. I admit it can be. All right. So as you can see here with this slide, which is, I probably should maximize it a little bit so we can see it better. Let's see. Uh-oh. Hopefully you can see this. Anyway, so here's some qualities of managers, right? Managers, they are more mind, right? Because again, task focused, so they're more, thinking these things through. So, some of the qualities are that they could be rational, consulting, persistent. They're focused on problem solving. They can also be tough-minded and analytical and structured and all of those things. Whereas some of the leadership qualities that's really applies to most leaders are, they're more about, the soul. So they're visionary and passionate. They could be creative and flexible, and many leaders, their goal is really to inspire, also to innovate, right? They're imaginative. They're not really so focused on, just completing the task all the time. That's not their primary focus anyway. So that's the difference. Okay. I'm hoping. I don't know where my little red box. Maybe I'll shrink it again. Sorry. Well, guess it did fit. All right. I'm getting it together, guys. Sorry. Want my visuals to be good. Okay. So now let's move into the leadership model. So let's start with talking about trait leadership. And so because leading is such an important process in all organizations, it's really been researched for decades. I mean, you'd be surprised how many different theories on leadership and styles and models that there are out there. I mean, but it's been researched for decades. And so early approaches to leadership called the trait model and behavior model really sought to determine what effective leaders are like as people and what they do that makes them so effective. So the trait model of leadership is focused on identifying the personal characteristics that are responsible for effective leadership. And so decades of research indicates that certain personal characteristics do appear to be associated with effective leadership. And although this model is called the trait model, some of the personal characteristics that it identifies are not personality traits per se, but rather are concerned with a leader's skills, abilities, and knowledge and expertise. Leaders who do not possess these traits may be considered ineffective or may be ineffective. However, traits alone are not the key to understanding leader effectiveness. Some effective leaders do not possess all of the traits identified in this model, and some leaders who do possess them are not effective in their leadership roles. And this is a lack of consistent relationship between leader traits and leader effectiveness. This type of lack of consistency is what led researchers to shift their attention away from this actual model. So, so the um, physical, social, and work-related characteristics of leaders have also been studied, right? So, we just talked about the weak relationship between personal traits and leader success based on this model. But the traits are really, again, distinguishing personal characteristics of a leader, such as intelligence and values and self-confidence and appearance. The appropriateness of a trait or set of traits really depends on the leadership situation. The same traits do not really apply to every organization or situation. And further studies actually expand leadership beyond traits to focus on the relationship between leaders and followers, actually. So here are some um, actually, and this exhibit is in your book, but this basically, what this does is summarizes the physical, this chart right here, summarizes the physical social and personal leadership characteristics that have received the greatest research support. However, these characteristics do not really stand alone, and the appropriateness of a trait or set of traits really depends on the leadership situation again. So, but here's just some characteristics, um, further characteristics of personal traits of some leaders, and that's what this chart is actually showing. There are two basic categories of leadership behaviors that have been identified as important for leadership, and those are task oriented behavior and people oriented behavior. And so it's really important to understand these two types of behaviors as the foundation of some of our important leadership studies. And so we're going to start by discussing our Ohio State studies. So, researchers at Ohio State University in the 1940s and 50s identified two basic kinds of leader behaviors that many leaders engaged in to influence their subordinates. And those two behaviors are consideration and initiation or initiating structure were the two. And so, what the study was showing was that leaders engage in consideration when they show their subordinates that they trust and respect and care about them. Also, managers who truly look out for the well being of their subordinates and do what they can to help subordinates feel good and enjoy their work perform consideration behaviors. The considerate leaders are kind of thought to be friendly and provide open communication. They develop teamwork and are oriented toward their subordinates' welfare. The initiating structure, leaders, when they engage in this particular structure, they make sure that the work gets done. So now we've shifted from that people to the task, right? From the earlier slide. They make sure that the work gets done and subordinates perform their jobs acceptably and that the organization is effective and efficient. So, examples of initiating structure include assigning tasks to individuals or work groups, or letting subordinates know what is expected of them, deciding how work should be done, and making schedules. All of these task sort of focused items, if you will. Um, so, the extent to which a leader is task oriented and direct subordinate activities toward goal attainment is initiating structure. Sorry. So let's go now to our Michigan studies, and so the researchers um, at University of Michigan identified two categories of behaviors as well: employee-centered behaviors and job-oriented behaviors that roughly correspond to consideration and initiating structure, respectively. So the employee-centered leaders were the effective leaders who established high performance goals and displayed supportive behavior towards the subordinates. So very similar to our consideration from our Ohio studies. And then the job-centered leaders were considered less effective and less concerned with goal achievement and human needs in favor of meeting schedules, keeping costs low, and achieving efficiency. So again, it's very similar. The researchers at the University of Texas developed a leadership grid, which is a two-dimensional model that measures the concern for people and their production. Concern for production and a concern for people, as you can see here. So each axis on the grid is a 9-point scale. So 1 to 9 and 1 to 9 respectively, with 1 meaning that there's a low concern and 9 meaning that there's a high concern for either people or production. And so team management, if we look at team management, which is here, is often considered the most effective style for all managers. Organization members work together to accomplish task outcomes, as you can see, because it's a 9, and it's a 9 on the concern for people and 9 on the concern for production. When you look at country club management, which is here, it occurs when primary emphasis is given to people rather than to work outputs. So it's considered concern for people is a 9, but then concern for production is a 1. Authority compliance management occurs when efficiency in operations is the dominant orientation. So efficiency in operations is predominant. So it's high concern for production, and it's not really people focused. Here we are with our middle of the road management. It reflects a moderate concern, as you can see, for both people and production. And then our impoverished management means the absence of a management philosophy. Managers really exert little effort toward interpersonal relationships or work accomplishment for that matter. So there are these several models of leadership called contingency approaches. And what these approaches do is they explain a relationship between leadership styles and specific situations. The three prominent contingency models that will be discussed were developed to shed light on what makes managers effective leaders. And so those are Hershey and Blanchard. The leadership model, which is the Fiedler, or referred to as a Fiedler, and then substitutes for leadership concept. So let's talk first about our situational theory, which is also referred to as Hershey and Blanchard's theory. So if you look here at this grid, right? So our Hershey's and Blanchard's situational theory. Oh, let's back up. I'm sorry. The situational theory really is a contingency approach to leadership that links the leader's behavioral style with the task readiness of subordinates. The theory states that subordinates vary actually in their readiness level. And so let's look at this. And so what this grid is saying, it summarizes really the relationship between leader style and follower readiness. Well, no, I'm sorry. I want to back up one more time. I apologize. My slides are, sorry. So let's back up again just to explain a little bit more about Hershey and Blanchard. So this theory really states that subordinates vary in their readiness level. And so people low in task readiness due to limited skills, lack of training, or insecurity need a different leadership style than those with a high readiness. Vice versa, people with high readiness tend to have ability, skills, confidence, and willingness to work, is what it says. And so this situational theory of leadership is really an interesting extension of the behavioral theory summarized in the leadership grid before the other one that we just looked at. And so this approach, this Hershey and Blanchard's approach, focuses a great deal of attention on the characteristics of followers and determining the appropriate leadership behavior. And so the point of Hershey and Blanchard is that subordinates vary in readiness level. And so let's look at, now we can go to our little graph here. So this really summarizes the relationship style and follower readiness. The telling style, if you can see, over here. So the telling style reflects a high concern for tasks and a low concern for people and relationships. This highly directive style really involves giving explicit directions about how tasks should be accomplished. Whereas the selling style right here is based on a high concern for both people and tasks. So with this approach, the leader explains decisions and gives subordinates a chance to ask questions and gain clarity and understanding about work tasks. The next behavior, which is participating, which is right there, is based on a combination of high concern for people and um, relationships and a low concern for production tasks. So the leader shares ideas with subordinates, gives them a chance to participate, and facilitates decision making. The fourth style, the delegating style, reflects a low concern for both relationships and tasks. This leader style provides really little direction and little support because the leader turns over responsibility for decisions and their implementation to subordinates. So if you look down below here, you'll see, follower directed and leader directed behaviors and readiness. But this curve up here is bell shaped. It's called prescriptive curve because it really indicates when each leader style should be used. And so the readiness level, which is down here, followers is indicated in the lower part of the exhibit. So R1 is low readiness right here. And R4 represents a high level or high readiness. So the telling style is for low readiness followers because people are unwilling or unable because of poor abilities and skills, little experience, or insecurity. So if you see here, which is our telling style, which is here, right? And so that's why that's ranked low. Let me see what else I wanna. So then the leader, right. So our telling style. Sometimes I get with grids, my eyes get a little right. So so it is ranked low because people are unwilling because of their poor skills. The leader is specific, really telling people exactly what to do, how to do it, and when. Whereas our selling and participating styles really work. Right here, and as you can see here, they really work for our followers because at moderate readiness levels. For example, followers might lack some education and experience for the job, but really have a high confidence and interest and willingness to learn. So as shown in the exhibit, the selling style is effective in a situation because it involves giving direction, but also it includes seeking input from others and really clarifying tasks rather than simply instructing that they should be performed. So when followers have the necessary skills and expertise but are somewhat insecure, their abilities or lack of high willingness, the participating style then enables the leader to guide followers' development. As well as act as a resource for advice and assistance. So when followers demonstrate a high readiness, that is, they have a high levels of education, experience, and readiness to accept responsibility for their own behavior, the delegating style at that point can be effective and fall within that area of high readiness because of the high readiness level of followers at this particular point, at the delegating point, the leader can then delegate responsibility for decisions and implementation to subordinates who have the skills and abilities and those positive attitudes to be able to follow through with what is delegated to them. So the leader provides a general goal and sufficient authority to do the task as the followers really see fit. And so that's why that falls there. And this should also be in your book as well. So now let's shift and talk about Fiedler's contingency theory. Fiedler's contingency model really helps to explain why a manager may be an effective leader in one situation and an ineffective leader in another. It also suggests which kind of managers are likely to be most effective and in which situations. So Fiedler hypothesized that personal characteristics can influence leader effectiveness. He uses the term leader style to refer to a manager's characteristic approach to leadership and really identify two basic leader styles. The first one is relationship oriented, and then the second one is task oriented as well. So, the cornerstone of Fiedler's theory is the extent to which the leader style is relationship or task. So, leadership style is measured with a questionnaire known as the least preferred coworker, or LPC. You might find that or see that word in your readings a lot, which is a set of 16 bipolar adjectives on a 8-point scale. So the suitability of a person's leadership style is determined really by whether the situation is favorable or unfavorable. So since leadership styles are difficult to change, the idea is to match the leader style with the situation most favorable for that person's real effectiveness. So let's talk about relationship oriented leaders. So, relationship oriented leaders are primarily concerned with developing good relationships with their subordinates and being liked by them. They get the job done while focusing on maintaining high quality interpersonal relationships with their subordinates, whereas task-oriented leaders are primarily concerned with ensuring that subordinates perform at a high level. We just kind of talked about this with those Ohio and Michigan studies, and focused on task accomplishment. So let's talk about how this works and how this fits. So, when Fiedler examined the relationships among leadership style and situational favorability, he found the pattern that was shown in this graph that you're looking at right now. That task-oriented leaders are more effective when the situation is either um, highly favorable or highly unfavorable. So also what you're seeing is that relationship oriented leaders are more effective in situations of moderate favorability. So the task oriented leader excels in a favorable situation because everybody gets along, right? The task is clear, the leader has the power, all that's needed for someone to lead the charge and provide direction. Similarly, if the situation is highly unfavorable to the leader, a great deal of structure and task direction is still needed. So these people really thrive on um, being able to have order. And so they're really process oriented. As long as it's spelled out, they're really good. So a strong leader will define task structure and establish authority over subordinates. Because leader member relations are poor anyway, a strong task orientation will really make no difference in the leader's popularity. For example, there were researchers at the University of Chicago who looked at CEOs of companies in turnaround situations. So basically, when the company is in a situation where things are going bad and they need to turn things around relatively fast, we're typically so for example, where companies typically have high debt loads and need to improve results in a hurry, they found that tough-minded, task-focused characteristics such as analytical skills, a focus on efficiency, and setting high standards were more valuable leader qualities than were relationship skills such as good communication, listening, and teamwork. The relationship oriented leader performs better in a situation of intermediate favorability because human relation skills are important in achieving high group performance. So, in those situations, the leader may be moderately well liked, have some power, and supervise jobs that contain some ambiguity. My words are flowing. So a leader with good interpersonal skills can create a positive group environment really that will improve relationships, clarify tasks, and really establish power. So basically, what a leader needs to know to apply this theory are two things. First, the leader should know whether he or she has a relationship or a task-oriented style. Second, the leader should diagnose the situation and determine whether leader-member relations, task structure, and position power are favorable or unfavorable. So the final contingency approach that we're going to be discussing is the situational approach, or the leader substitute model. Rather, not situational, sorry. The leader substitute model. So basically, this approach suggests that situational variables can be so powerful that they substitute for or neutralize the need for leadership. So the leader substitute model really suggests that leadership is sometimes unnecessary because substitutes are present, so they don't really need it. So a substitute or leader substitute is something that acts in place of the influence of a leader and makes leadership unnecessary. It is a characteristic of a subordinate or of a situation or context that acts in place of the influence of a leader and makes leadership unnecessary. So highly example would be highly professional subordinates. They do not need a leader to tell them what to do, or highly structured task substitutes for task-oriented style, and a satisfying task substitute for the people-oriented style, based on kind of what we just talked about. So, some of the characteristics of subordinates that could actually be used to substitute a leader could be their skills and abilities and experience, knowledge, motivation. These can all be substitutes for leaderships. Characteristics of the situation or context, such as the extent to which the work is interesting and enjoyable, can also be substitutes. So when managers empower their subordinates or use self-managed teams, the need for leadership influence is decreased because team members can really manage themselves. So substitutes for leaderships can really increase organizational efficiency and effectiveness because they free up some of the leaders' valuable time, thus allowing them to really focus their efforts on discovering new ways to improve an organization's effectiveness. Now, a neutralizer counteracts the leadership style and prevents a leader from displaying certain behaviors. For example, if a leader lacks position power or is physically removed from subordinates, the ability to give directions is reduced. So situational variables include characteristics of like subordinate task and the organization. So bottom line is really that leaders should really adopt a style complementary to the organizational situation, really to ensure that both the task needs and the people needs of the organizations are being met. So let's get into some specific leadership styles. I want to start off by talking about servant leaders. This is one that's near and dear to my heart. I tell people a lot of times that my dream one day, or if I were to think of me being at my best self, that eventually through that transformation that I'll become a servant leader. So this leadership style, you know. You'll find if you ever want to research it further, it's not really heavily researched in terms of theory. There's not a lot of research or purposeful research done on it. This leadership style really builds on examples found in the New Testament of the Bible. So in 1970, a gentleman by the name of Robert Greenleaf proposed the concept of servant leadership. And it became the title of a book that was published in 1977. Greenleaf proposed that service to followers really is the primary responsibility of leaders. So not so much organizational effectiveness, but service to the followers and the essence of really ethical leadership. So servant leadership in a workplace really is about helping others to accomplish shared objectives by facilitating individual development, empowerment, and collective work that's consistent with the health and the long-term welfare of the followers. To be a good servant leader, um, a leader must attend to the needs of their followers and really help them to become wiser and more willing to accept their responsibilities. This type of leadership includes nurturing and defending sometimes and empowering their followers. It is only by understanding followers really that the leader can determine how to best serve the needs of their followers, employees, subordinates, whatever you want to call it. They usually have to learn how to listen to the people that's underneath them. They learn about their needs and aspirations and willing to share in their pain and frustration. They also are responsible for establishing trust and keeping a completely honest and open environment for employees to feel comfortable coming in. So, there are a lot of benefits to servant leaders. We think of some of our servant leaders examples would be people like Mother Teresa or even Martin Luther King as a servant leader. Who are some others that we can come to mind? I used to have like a list, but anyway, those are just a couple of examples. So some of the benefits of servant leadership are similar to those suggested by other theories that are focused on supporting and empowering others. Um, so, leader integrity and concern for subordinates really is likely to increase trust from their employees, loyalty and satisfaction, a favorable relationship, and increased power for the leader really make it easier to influence, right? Their subordinates to carry out requests. Other benefits derived from this style derived from development, empowerment, and empowerment of subordinates really have been demonstrated to just really, really have great, great results. So that's servant leadership. Charismatic leadership. Now this one is this is an interesting style. Um, I recently took a survey. Not a survey, but like a little test, a leadership test, and my results actually showed that I am a cross between charismatic and transformational leader. I could see the charismatic, transformational is what a lot of people try to be, and I guess charismatic leadership is a form of transformational leadership, really, if you really think about it. But anyway, a charismatic leader really has the ability to inspire and motivate people to do more than they would normally do, despite obstacles of personal sacrifice. These people are usually really friendly and they have charisma, right? So they're enthusiastic and self confident leaders who are able to clearly communicate their vision of how good things could be in groups, right? So these are people like Oprah falls into charismatic, maybe slightly transformational, right? These are people who, people gravitate towards charismatic people. And so these people may not even, well, I was reading something the other day where it was saying charismatic leaders are usually put in place by other people. They may not be true leaders, but because everybody likes them, they're usually put in a position of leadership. They may not even have the best leadership qualities, but because people will listen to them, it makes them a leader. And so it's really, I had to chuckle on that because it's so true. But their vision, the vision of charismatic leaders usually includes dramatic improvements, really, in both group and organizational performance as a result of changes in the structure and the culture. It paves the way for gaining competitive advantage. Charismatic leaders also are skilled in the art of visionary leadership. right? So a vision is an attractive, ideal future, really, that is credible yet not readily attainable. And so charismatic leaders have a strong vision for the future, almost an obsession sometimes, and they can motivate others to help realize it. So charisma can also be used for self-serving purposes that lead to deception, manipulation, and exploitation. And so that's the kind of the dark side of leadership. They use their charismatic or their charisma to their advantage, and it's not always something that's positive. When we really study um, leadership, they said that like Hitler was a charismatic leader, but he was the dark side of leadership, right? So he used his influence to do harm, and to hurt others, and so it wasn't good. Was not good at all. Okay, so transformational leadership. Now, this was, people, when you hear or say the word transformational leader, you get that because everybody wants to be a transformational. It's like has this little halo over it or something. We were talking about that the other day. I was having a discussion with someone about why, when people hear transformational leadership, it's it has this, I don't know, it's like the leader that's on the pedestal, as if the other forms of leadership aren't, as effective. But anyway, transformational leaders are really distinguished by their special ability to bring about innovation and change. They recognize followers' needs and concerns, and they really help them to look at old problems in new ways, and encourage them to answer really the status quo. Um, these leaders have the ability to create significant change in both followers and the organization. They have the ability to lead changes in the organization's mission, the structure, and human resource management. They also focus on intangibles such as vision, shared values, and ideas, to build relationships and give meaning to activities, and also to enlist followers in that change. There was a recent study that confirmed that transformational leadership had a positive impact on follower development and overall follower performance. And so, these skills can be learned though, and it's not ingrained personality characteristics such as a charismatic leader, for example. So, transformational leaders, bottom line, they've been really known for motivating and influencing their employees or their subordinates, and so that's I guess why people like them so much. They're able to transform an environment. So, here's some traits that I just spoke about for transformational leader. Now, transactional leader, opposite kind of, right? So now we're, again, creeping over to the dark side, right? People usually don't like transactional leaders because they're like task focused, directive usually. But these leaders clarify subordinates' role and task requirements. So it goes back to the task focus that we just talked about. They initiate structure, they provide appropriate rewards, and really try to meet the social needs of subordinates. However, these leaders excel at management functions. They're usually known for being hardworking and tolerant, fair-minded, but they're definitely task, right? So they're not as fun sometimes as the transformational leaders. Transactional leaders, thus, transaction should give a hint. They stress the impersonal aspects of performance, such as plans and schedules and deadlines and budgets, right? They also have a sense of commitment to the organization and conform to these organizational norms. And so, again, sometimes they're not looked at as being as fun as some of the others. They're not as warm sometimes as some of the others. But the reason why you see this side to side right here is that transformational leadership is often contrasted with transactional leadership. Where transactional leadership involves more managers using their reward and coercive power to encourage high performance, right? So they're more likely to reprimand low performance and reward high performance, whereas transactional leadership or transformational leadership, um, subordinates tend to have naturally higher levels of job performance. They get employees to perform by getting them to trust them and positively trying to influence the motivation versus you get a reward or a reprimand if you don't do it. And so those are some of the differences between these two styles of leadership. So we're going to end here, and then our next lesson we're really going to get into power as it relates to leadership, and tying everything together in terms of followers and leadership power and coercion and how that works with these leadership styles.